Hello, welcome to the corner of Morris and Queen. I'm Chris Green, owner of Atlantic News, and joining us today is CEO of Sona Nanotech, David Regan. David, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Chris. It's a delight to be here. I've been coming to Atlantic News for years, and it's fascinating to see the inner workings here in the back office today.
Yes, well, we're going to talk about the company that you're in charge of, and why are you in charge of this company if you're not a doctor, and a little bit about your backstory and a little bit about the market here in Halifax. So to start off, so currently you're the CEO of Sona Nanotech. Tell us a little bit about this company.
Sure, and I'll acknowledge my grade 12 chemistry teacher would be appalled to know that I'm leading a life sciences company, but it does make sense if I can explain it a little bit for you. Of course, we're a publicly listed company, and so the realities of that require a fair bit of expertise in the financial domain in terms of the raising of money and the allocating of capital.
That's your background.
And has been my background in capital markets, we'll call it.
Okay, so how long have you been with Sona Nanotech?
Been with Sona Nanotech about 4 years, 4.5 years now. It's been an exciting ride, I'll tell you that. It's been experientially enriching along the way, with lots of highs and lows as well. But it's been redeeming, and suddenly we're in a very, very interesting place.
Yes, and I did a little bit of research, and it sounds like you're at a really cool spot in the company. Little bit about yourself. You're from this area. What brought you from a boy in Bedford to what you're doing now?
Sure. Well, it was sort of a round trip over many decades, during which I had moved away and worked in Europe and the U.S., and then came home somewhat irrationally, I think, from an economic perspective anyway, but there is a draw.
Now it's looking good, not being in the South.
It is, and of course it was time to have a family and raise kids, and no better place to do that in the world than Nova Scotia.
Great. So did you look for a job like this, or someone in your field? They were looking for somebody with your expertise, or something in between?
It's the latter there, definitely. Mm-hmm. I had a great career with a local company. We grew from pretty much scratch here, called DHX Media, and it then subsequently became Wild Brain, and was one of the largest kids content companies in the world. And from there, this new opportunity of Sona seemed like an exciting opportunity, and that was exciting being the operative word.
Nice. So currently, Sona is all of your time is working on these gold nanorods that are placed in tumors, and somehow through targeted hypothermia treatment, these gold nanorods act as tuning forks to help alleviate the cancer tumor. Help me out there.
Sure. If you haven't lost your audience yet after that statement, let me just say that it's not as complicated as it sounds. And in fact, when I first came into it, being a non-scientist, I had to do a lot of reading and a deep dive. And you realized, oh, I see what they're talking about. This nanotechnology sounds all very sophisticated and complicated. But in reality, all it is it's manipulating materials at the near atomic scale. So when they're really, really small, we work with typically gold and nanoparticles, and you can do really funky things with materials at that size, and some of their properties actually are altered. But in particular, you can effectively fuse or conjugate these little nanoparticles to molecules. And they're that small. And therefore, you can do all sorts of interesting things with them. And that's, frankly, the premise of the pregnancy test, uses those concepts where antibodies are attached to nanoparticles. That's it, very simply.
So these nanoparticles, what's the size? Is it a grain of rice, a half of grain of rice? Can you see this? Like, what is it that you're actually putting in the tumors?
Yes, I think that
what's the size of it?
The size of it is, 1 nanometer is I think a hair is about 60,000 nanometers wide.
So with the human eye, you can't see this thing
Correct.
you're putting in.
Correct. This is almost like dealing with atoms.
Wow, amazing. And briefly, for a non-specialist, why is it that in such small amounts you can do more things with it?
Well, again, because you take it down to the size of molecules, you can actually work with those. You're on a level playing field, if you will, apples to apples, in that particular. And then beyond that, the chemistry, enables you to go to that scale.
I see. Okay. And so the exciting development with the company currently, what's happening? You just had a study published in a peer-reviewed journal, which sounds like a good news for you guys. What exactly are you working on?
Well, it's interesting going back 4 or 5 years ago, because when I came into the company and again did the deep dive on sort of doing due diligence to understand some of the science, try to understand some of the science, I was struck by a number of things. First was the extent of research out there on these concepts that we'll talk about that have been around for 20 years. And there's a lot of research been done out there using nanoparticles for cancer treatments effectively.
So this is not a new idea in the last year.
Not at all. But no one has pulled it all together. Okay, and at the time, the company was focused on rapid tests. And my question to the folks involved was, why are we not focused on cancer? It's a much bigger and much more important, frankly, area of focus with tremendous potential there. And the answer I got was, well, we need near-term revenue, and the cancer research is a very long road, but biotechs are set up in the U.S. and in Canada too, to a lesser extent, all the time, not to make revenue, but to prove out a technology. And value accretes as you de-risk through studies, you de-risk the technology. That's what we are doing now.
It's like working through the jungle, and you work through these issues, and then you come out, there's some sunlight, and hey, we were successful in this, and now what's the next step?
That's it. And of course, there are some very large, both medical device companies like Stryker and Medtronic and a plethora of other ones, and pharmaceutical companies who rely on these effectively startup biotechs to feed their pipelines, feed their engines of commercialization. And that's their specialty, right, is taking things through regulatory channels and then leveraging their sales forces and commercialization engines. And that's what, we aspire to work with one of those in due course.
Eventually. But right now you're staying in your lane. You're now at the third stage of clinical studies. Where are you with this?
We're preclinical. Still currently.
Preclinical means, you explained before, this means non-human.
That's right. We're not in humans yet. So in order to get regulatory sign-off to commercialize any medical treatment, let's say, you obviously have to produce, as I like to call it, a mountain of data, of research, showing, not only what your therapy is and how it works, but when it doesn't work, why it doesn't work. And those studies are typically done in animal models.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's probably good news that you have to jump through a lot of hoops in order to test this on humans.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. Now, it's the same set of standards used for all medical devices as opposed to pharmaceuticals. However, in our case, we're dealing with inert gold. So we're injecting gold into cancer tumors. Now, we've been putting inert gold into humans for centuries, by the way, exactly as you point to your teeth.
Yeah.
And also even for arthritis treatments to joints. So the risk profile in that sense is very, very low. Plus, what we're doing in our therapy, which I can talk more about, is injecting those gold nanorods directly into tumors, not delivering them systemically. So therefore, we can put in smaller amounts. And of course, with anything like that.
What does that mean, not doing it systemically?
Not injecting it such that it goes throughout the body.
Okay, so directly you're putting this nanorod in the tumor, in the mouse.
Right. Yes,
okay.
Plural, like millions of these things. And of course, that means you can use fewer of them and less of the solution, and therefore the toxicity risk is inherently lower. Again, even though we're dealing with inert gold.
So you've had success in these trials with mice where the nanorods are placed in the tumors, and this therapy, as I was stumbling before, basically a very low level of heat comes in, and what you found is this stimulates the immune system, and eventually these tumors basically burn up?
Well, yeah, and let's start with the current standard of care, and as we like to say, sadly, a lot of the treatments have been for cancer have involved poisoning, burning, or cutting.
Yeah.
And
chemotherapy, radioactive.
Exactly, and surgery, and each of which has obvious risks. And
I think I saw about a third right now. These cancers you're looking at: melanoma,
colorectal, and breast cancer.
About a third of the time it works.
Well,
now
those are the we talk about the cutting, burning, and poisoning, but there have been great strides made in the immunotherapy realm in the last 15, 20 years, in which inhibitors have been used to keep your body to allow your body to go ahead, your immune system,
itself.
To attack the cancer, which it was, of course, not wanting to do because it thought it's you.
Right. Basically what your technology is getting the immune system up to speed so it can take care of this tumor.
Partially, yes, and I'll tell you what happened is, when we went into this and we kind of did a pivot to focus on this cancer treatment, it was a very mechanical view we had, in which we inject gold nanorod solution into a tumor, and then we shoot a near infrared light, whether it be a laser or an LED light.
So here's the tuning fork part of the show.
Yes, that's tuned to the same wavelength as these little nanoparticles. Now, our nanoparticles are nanorods, and so we're able to tune the rod through the length and the width to resonate with a particular wavelength of energy. Now, again, this starts to sound complicated, and that's when I try and whip out a laser pointer, a red laser pointer, and if you take one of those and point it at your finger directly, you'll notice it goes right through harmlessly. It lights up your finger. And so this is non-thermal energy, and it passes through, and those wavelengths, when they hit the little gold nanorods, the gold nanorods serve as tuning forks, and they start to resonate, and they start to vibrate, and they start to generate heat as a result. So they convert the non-thermal energy, light energy, into heat, which is really pretty cool.
And then and so this heat stimulates the immune system, or does this heat actually work on the tumors?
Well, now slow down here, Chris. Let's take this piece by piece. First of all, it effectively heat kills cancer and cancer cells. And cancer cells are more susceptible to heat than our healthy cells. So if you can heat it at about 45 degrees Celsius, you can kill cancer cells and not harm any other cells.
So that's the key. It's not too hot.
Exactly. It's a mild hyperthermia. It's not ablation. And because there are other therapies out there that blast things, but there's a lot of burning that occurs.
So for an example, an ablation for somebody that has AFib, they come in and they just burn those babies at very high temperature.
There you go.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. So, there's a mechanical action there that's melting these cancer cells and therefore shrinking the tumors. And we've shown really profound results in that. And you were looking at the paper that was published recently, and we've got pictures in there of the before and after of those tumors. Now, we thought that was pretty cool. And so we started looking at which type of cancer to focus on first in terms of developing a therapy. And we went and did some diligence, and were put in touch with a local surgical oncologist and researcher, Dr. Carmen Giacomantonio. And when I explained to Carmen, which is ironic to say, but as I explained it to him, he just kind of rolled his eyes and said, "You guys have no idea what you have here." Because while we thought we were just shrinking tumors, he's the one who enlightened us, because he spent a career, frankly, researching immunotherapies. And he recognized the fact that we were causing the release of neoantigens when we gently destroy those tumors.
So this is the so-called vaccine effect.
Well, no. Let's again. We'll get to.
There's
we'll
a lot
get there.
of layers
We'll
here.
get there. A lot of layers.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We'll peel the onion back, and what those neoantigens do is effectively, it's a new antigen that the immune system has not seen before, and the immune system is constantly scanning for predators, invaders, etc. And so when it sees something new, it sparks its interest. And that's what's necessary often to get it to go and attack. Because in many cases, there isn't enough of a, I guess a spark, you might call it, to get the immune system to engage.
Okay. So then this flicks the switch, so to speak, and then the immune system starts to work and really goes after this tumor.
That's it. And so the combination of being able to shrink it and get the immune system to kick in, and then the next layer to this onion is that we found that, for instance, I mentioned these immunotherapies that have been so powerful in helping patients by tricking the system to go after the cancer. Well, the sad news on that front is that they only work 20 to 30% of the time. A lot of the time, those therapies don't work. And what's understood now is that they don't seem to work with cold tumors. What our therapy, as we call it, targeted hyperthermia therapy, appears to do is provide enough of a spark to the system that after we do it, if you apply the immunotherapy, it works extremely well, where it didn't work at all prior to the application of our therapy.
So your technique is turning a cold tumor into a hot tumor?
Bingo. Yeah, an immunogenically hot tumor. That's the goal here.
And a hot tumor means that the immune system can work in it.
Right. The immune system's engaged on it. That's effectively it.
I see. So these have been your studies, your successful studies so far. You have this piece published in the journal. That's the next hurdle. In the process, you had to raise money to do this. Now you're in the journal. You've raised money. Now the next step is to try this in humans. Do I have that right?
Yeah, and the journal, you're referring, of course, to the work that Dr. Giacomantonio and Barry Kennedy and Cheryl Dean and the whole team at the Giacomantonio lab at Dalhousie University, who drove these studies, published a very strong piece that was peer-reviewed and accepted into Frontiers in Immunology. And I'd note that it's one of their top downloaded papers from their website, too, which is, I think, a good evidence of how profound we think it is.
So congrats. That's quite a victory for the company, I imagine.
Well, look, we're very pleased. It's a victory for everyone. We want to move this science forward, and we are standing on the shoulders of giants because, as I say, there's lots of prior research. Just look in our 28-page paper in that journal, and the last couple of pages refer to our references of past studies that we've learned from and enabled us to get to this point.
Wow. Okay. So you're in a journey here. You've been published. There's been success. The next step is to start having human trials. Is that
right?
Not
I think
tomorrow, but
sure.
Down the road.
As some people have pointed out, cancer has been cured many times in mice. Right. The real challenge is in humans, and to what extent does this translate? Now, we're very, very encouraged by the results we've seen to date, and we're very optimistic for a number of reasons that it will translate, and so therefore we are very keen to push this forward and get into a situation where we can help people with this therapy.
Right. Fantastic. So the local angle, you mentioned Dalhousie University. Originally, the doctor you mentioned is from Cape Breton or Antigonish. I'm looking for the local angle here.
Okay,
I see
so
that the company's in Dartmouth.
A couple intermixed there, but the technology came out of the chemistry lab at St. Francis Xavier University in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, and was the product of three co-founders of the company who really set about solving a conundrum in science or in nanotechnology, which was look, those folks knew that as they'd say, well, everyone knows that of all the nanoparticle types, nanorods are the most functional because you can tune them with that aspect ratio of width and length. But everyone also knows you can't use them for in vivo medical purposes because to elongate them into that rod-like shape requires a toxin. And if you're going to put, millions of these things into a body, that's something that can be a real concern. And so they set out to solve that conundrum and said, well, what if we could create a gold nanorod, one of these highly functional structures, but do it without the toxic substance? And that is what is our core patent that we hold in the company at Sona Nanotech.
So without
we achieved that.
So without the toxic substance means you do it in very small amounts, and then you're putting it directly in the tumor rather than throughout the body. Is that right?
Well, no. It's first of all just the construction, the manufacturing of the nanorods. We make those without toxins. We uniquely do that, so our gold nanorods are uniquely biocompatible.
So this is your special sauce.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
So this was developed up at the university, from what I understand, is you have to have a special decoder ring to go to school there. I see these rings around. Yes.
You do, absolutely. Yes,
Yeah.
we wear those with pride.
Are you a grad of there?
I am.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And so then I heard Dalhousie. So a lot of the recent work with other doctors have been at the lab at Dal here?
Well, of course, there's a leading medical school at Dalhousie and a number of different laboratories that are funded in a variety of different ways at Dalhousie. Okay. And so we're very fortunate to have that in our local community. And of course, it's great fun to be able to do that work with partners here in the same province as ourselves.
Nice. And so the company is in Dartmouth, and you mentioned when you joined them, they were doing a lot of work with rapid testing. So this company was involved, like a lot of other biotech companies, with COVID on the testing aspect, and that's what the company. Is that how the company started?
The company started developing rapid tests, yes, and that was pre-COVID, frankly. And now we've pivoted to this higher and better use, frankly, and where we've had this success of late.
So this is the main focus, what we're talking about here, the nanotech.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a full team push, of course, right now, and to both develop all the data from studies we need in order to be able to satisfy regulators when we put applications in, and to get into humans.
So the company's in Dartmouth. There's a lab over there. You do work at Dal here. Going forward with the tests, with the human tests, that'll be done here in Nova Scotia, or do you know that yet?
We'll do a number of different studies, and the first human study is likely to be overseas. And a very, very limited, as it's referred to, an early feasibility study, which would be a handful of patients to show that safety can be demonstrated, and to some extent efficacy too. With these human studies, it's always first and foremost safety when you're doing an early feasibility study. Next, we're looking to line up a study right here in Atlantic Canada, focusing on melanoma. And the focus would be on patients suffering from later stage melanoma for whom they have failed every other therapy. So that's the necessary elements in order to get them enrolled in.
You need to try all the tried and true things first, and those don't work. And then here's something, and they sign off, and they're told, here's something new. It's not guaranteed, but do you want to try it?
That's pretty much it.
There.
That's pretty much it. And it's compelling because if nothing else has worked, and
why not?
And one has stage 3 or 4 melanoma, we expect that we can have a lot of impact in that sense, starting with, frankly, the worst of the worst. Right. And then, if we're successful with that, as we believe we will be, you then step back from there to stage 2, to stage 1, etc. over time.
Nice. Well, very exciting. Why the initial tests overseas? Is it just because it's easier to get it started? Why not do it here?
It's easier and faster to get it done overseas is the reality.
Because of regulations in different countries?
Exactly.
And are we talking Europe, Asia, all of the above?
Well, looking at different jurisdictions, but what's necessary for us is that there be a high prevalence of melanoma, and it's necessary that part of the local standard of care include immunotherapy.
Okay, so a lot of boxes have to be checked there.
And then optimize for that.
So you're starting with melanoma, and then you'll move on, and because of that's a good starting point. But then the idea is that then you'll move on to rectal cancer, breast cancer. Could this be prostate cancer?
Yeah, once we prove it out, and melanoma is being focused on largely because it's so accessible. Of course, we have our light device is laser, and a lot easier to address melanoma to start with. But we see this having tremendous potential for a number of different solid tumors, including cervical cancer, possibly breast cancer, colorectal cancer, etc. It goes on from there.
So the possibilities here are quite exciting in terms of what this could do to help people's lives.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, of course, it's a long road, and it's heart-wrenching because we get folks writing in, saying,
I want it now.
Please, can you use this? And of course, there's a due process for good reasons here, but we hope and we are pushing like mad to get to the stage where we can prove this out and then start helping people.
That's great. How many people does the company employ here in Halifax in the HRM?
8 people here in Nova Scotia. We've got 1 in Austin, Texas.
Why Austin, Texas? Cowboy hat? What?
Yes, as a matter of fact. But we acquired a small company down there, which was really the principle of it is based there.
Part of
Len
what
Pagliaro.
you're doing. Okay.
Yes, Len Pagliaro, who's a PhD and frankly was the first one pursuing this targeted hyperthermia therapy.
So you purchased the technology to help you do your thing.
Well, it's a bit of an interesting story as to how that came about, because we were looking to develop, a cancer therapy, and Len came to us because he was trying to do the same thing, but he couldn't find good biocompatible gold nanorods that could be produced at scale anywhere. And so came to us, and we started an exclusive supply arrangement, and then, quickly realized that, look, we should be joining forces here. We're doing the same thing. And by the way, we've got the special sauce in terms of the biocompatible gold nanorods. So, we should just fold your operation into ours, and that's what we've done.
And what does he have that you guys need?
Well, he was the one. He had some good research. He had some patents, and he had initiated this concept of targeted hyperthermia therapy. So we were able to get up to speed, very, very quickly as a result.
So is part of your company then located in the U.S., or part of your supplies come from the U.S.? Does the shenanigans with current politics, will that raise its ugly head in terms of what you guys do? Let's assume the worst from the orange-skinned one, and this goes forward. Will that will this touch a company like you at all?
Yeah, well, knock on wood, I don't think it will. We're, given a research stage company. It's not.
You're not selling consumer products. It's a little.
No, we don't expect to be impacted by tariffs at all in that sense. And as far as the presence in the U.S., it's just some of the mind of the company is down there in Austin.
I see. All right, so you're here in Nova Scotia. For what you do for this, are you a biotech company? Are you a life science company? Yes to both?
Yes
What's
to both.
The category you're in?
It's a good question because we fall in amongst, medical device company, biotech, chemistry, but broadly life sciences.
So as somebody from south of the border, I have my PR. I'm working on it here. I know I'm from California. I know a little bit about Silicon Valley and that being the center. Is there an equivalent here in Canada? And would Atlantic Canada and Halifax be a spot where there's a lot of this stuff going on?
There's a burgeoning life sciences industry here in Nova Scotia, but more so, I'd say what's been really quite noticeable is the startup culture here. And in fact, a few years ago, I kind of questioned whether we were just marketing it better because you'd see all these reports coming out talking about all these different little companies, or is there been a culture shift, and is there a greater number of startups happening?
Because with the number, you have the dynamic and stuff happens, doesn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. And so I went to the authority on the matter, who's Peter Moreira.
I know Peter,
yes,
an economist.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And he's tracked actually the number of startups locally here, and can speak to the fact that no, it's not just anecdotal. The data supports it.
Okay.
And that's been really, really encouraging, and I think portends great things for Nova Scotia going forwards.
So that's part of the reason, would you say, of your success and staying here is because of the dynamic of where you are geographically?
Sure. We can.
Now,
we
I know
can
you're
say
from
that.
here.
We can say that, but we're here because fundamentally because of that technology coming out of university in Nova Scotia, and Nova Scotia, of course, is rich in universities and intellect, and that's what we've been able to leverage to start this company and grow it to its current level, and hope to be able to continue that.
Nice. Now, how about the investor side and the venture capital side? Part of your job, I imagine, is at the right time going out and raising money to do these tests. When you do that, when your company does that, being here in Nova Scotia, does that drive how you do it, or could you be anywhere? Are you looking for investors here? What's the approach there?
It's a big question, multifaceted.
Yes, that's
for
about
sure,
10 questions.
But
right?
It opens the door to some really interesting conversations all around. But it's an important one because access to capital is critical to these startups generally. We at Sona Nanotech, it's a bit of an unusual situation because as a preclinical company, we're not yet in humans. Those types of, call it research companies, are typically funded by specialist life science venture capitalists. We, for legacy reasons, are publicly listed, and so our shareholder base is retail.
What's that mean for legacy reasons?
Just we've historically been publicly listed.
Okay.
And, could we go private now? Well, if some fund or someone wanted to come along and take us private and say, look, let's just, do this in the dark, so we can focus on this a little bit more and not be distracted by the street.
And being private has its advantages, but
sure.
For legacy, you're publicly traded.
Yeah.
So
it is what it is
raise
at this
money,
stage.
The way you raise money is people buy your stock.
Well, when we sell shares from Treasury, right? Anyone can go on the market right now, buy or sell our shares. You're sort of for sale every day, at least fractions of the company are. But in order to fund the operations and take this company to the next level, we were very pleased to have raised $3.1 million from largely local investors, friends, family, associates, acquaintances, who we were able to convince us to the compelling nature of this technology and this therapy and its promise. It's promised to do good, and it's promised to generate good returns for shareholders as well.
Right. So you're publicly traded, and you've mentioned that for legacy reasons. Is that going forward? Could that change for your company, or being publicly traded works for you, or maybe you can't answer that because you don't know what's going to happen?
Well, look, once a company's publicly traded, it's sort of set on its way unless it's acquired by private equity or a large entity.
Okay.
In our case, sure, we'd hope to one day take this therapy to the level that it's so attractive to some of the bigger companies in this space that they feel like they just can't live without it, and of course feel like they can take it to the next level.
And the way that could work is that a big entity comes in, buys your company, then it's private, then that gives flexibility and independence in some areas to do some things because you're not a publicly traded company?
Yes, and if it's inside one of those other companies, of course, then you get access to all the tremendous
economies of
resources they have, not the least of which is a massive sales force and things like that, and regulatory capabilities.
Okay, great. So finally here, if everything goes well, what will be the next big splash that this company makes? So what are we looking at here? If somebody wants to stay tuned, are we saying in 5 years the human trials will be behind us and then we'll be on to the next stage? Or what? Yeah, I know this is station to station here, but
sure. No, we've got a number of exciting milestones coming up over the next in 2025. We have further research. Most importantly, we have an overseas human trial that we're looking to kick off. So we'll look forward to being able to announce that. And then as these things go in life sciences, the critical milestones then become first dosing of patients in a trial, because it's one thing to announce a trial, it's another to be able to enroll a sufficient number of the correct type of patients, and then to start dosing them, which would be the generic kind of term for it, treating them, if you will, and then generating the results and coming back to everyone with those results to be able to say, okay, look, this is how it looks in human. That's, of course, what we're most excited about. But then from there, there are two other elements that I should mention, which is, of course, then we'll be set up to do a larger clinical trial here in Canada and based in Atlantic Canada, which would qualify, subject to all the usual parameters, to be able to submit to the FDA and Health Canada to enable those regulators to sign off and permit us to start treating humans, with that treatment. We also have a bunch of skunkworks projects, because these gold nanorods, it's not just in tumors being used as you say, the tuning forks, as we say, to generate heat. There are other capabilities they have. And so we're working on some fun things and filing some provisional patents associated with that, because that will show, frankly, that these biocompatible gold nanorods are actually a platform technology.
And is that the vaccine effect?
No, that'll get into some further research that the Giacomo Antonio laboratory will be showing. They've shown in these mouse studies that not only when you treat tumors with targeted hyperthermia therapy can they disappear, but also the distant metastasized tumors can also disappear. And that's the proof that you're making a systemic change here. It's not just a one-off treatment of that.
You're helping the immune system really do some work in the body.
Yeah. And in spite of that great success, we still need to show the long-term studies to show that it doesn't recur.
And when you say it's important to be, if you get to the point where you're a platform
technology,
what does that mean?
Well, it's not a one-off use for this technology. It can be used for many different things.
Got it. Well, fascinating. I was just helping my 9th grade boy study for his biology test this morning, mitosis and meiosis, and I imagine this sort of discussion could really pique the imagination of some of these young scientists. This is amazing.
we need to expose kids to this stuff too, because you don't know what's involved until you get exposed to it and get excited by it. So we're always happy to talk.
Right. Well, David, I really appreciate you joining us today. Fascinating. Hopefully, as things develop, we can check in again and you can tell us how things are progressing.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to chat, Chris. Yeah. I really appreciated this and enjoyed it. Thank you.
Great. Well, the last question is one that I warned you about. What are you reading? Because we have the conversations we have here are with a wide variety of learned individuals that read all sorts of things. Could be something now or something recently that was cool enough and interesting enough that you would want to share with somebody.
Sure, happy to do that. And well, I can't immediately think of the book that's actually on my bedside right now that I got for Christmas. I think in the last year I read Values by Mark Carney, and not to get political, but and I'm not, but that book is really something. It's really very impressive, well written, well researched, well thought through, interesting. And I, though it's a thick one, I was able to put it in my ears while biking last May for 20 hours and over the course of many weeks, and get through it that way. Another book that I got was one that my son gave me called How to Grow Old.
Was that a hint? What was
that?
Yeah,
I guess so. I thought maybe maybe it was early gift for that, so I've set it aside, and we'll get to that in due course.
Nice. Well, I can bring my wife to the ground in a puddle of laughter when I tell her that I'm approaching middle age. She finds that quite funny. Yeah, the Carney book, we had 5 copies here in the store, and with everything that's going on in the news, they're all gone at the moment. Interesting individual, Bank of England. Yeah,
an interesting pedigree, but the book itself, and it very much has a focus on why we need to place a value on the environment, frankly.
Oh, nice. Well, David, thank you for that, and good luck with your endeavors, and maybe we'll talk again sometime soon.
Love to, Chris. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.